My name is Don White, and I do thank you for, I thank Gordon for allowing me to come to share this morning. I can't believe it, I'm actually a dad. Wow, it's good stuff. I want to share a verse with you that has really meant a lot to Grace and me these last few years, actually. It's a verse that kind of has sort of set the tone for our lives. It says in 1 Corinthians chapter 4, "So then, men ought to regard us as servants of Christ, as those who have been entrusted with the secret things of God, that those who are stewards, who have been given a sacred trust, must prove to be faithful." And I love that verse because it really speaks to my life. I have always dreamed of being found faithful. I want to tell you this morning a story of two divergent situations, all kind of occurring at the end of 2003. And the first is about two little girls. They're up on the screen right now. When these two girls were born, they were born the 12th of September 2003. They were born little teeny girls. They were only 2 kilos apiece, about 4 pounds. They had tremendous deformity in their face. You can't really see it that well in this picture, but you'll see it in another one, where they literally have a gap that runs right through their lip, through their nostril, up through their soft palate, all the way down into their throat. Just an empty gap. On one, it was on the left side, and on the other, it was on the right side. Absolutely mirrored. Just a miracle, actually, even that. But when their mother looked at these children, and I'm sure when the father and maybe even the in-laws and so forth looked at these two children, they said, "Sister, you got to get rid of these two. These are not going to make it." And so the mother of these two children wrapped them up, put them into a little basket, and she brought them to the gate of an orphanage in Jiangsu, which is right in the middle of Henan province, which is right in the middle of China. And she wrote a little note. And on that note, she said, and I'm going to obviously translate it for you, but on that note, she said, "Dear gracious people, we are not financially able to take care of our twins. Please keep them. They were born on the 12th of September, 2003. They were 3 days old, because that was the 15th of September. And these two little children had 3 strikes against them, basically. The first was they had a deformity. And in China, there's nothing worse than having a physical deformity. It is not a good place to be a handicapped person in China. Most handicapped people do not live to be 15 years old. Most cleft palate children die at a very early age. If they don't die at a very early age, they go without education, and almost all of them go deaf. Because one of the problems with being cleft palate is that you fill your ears with water, and your water just surrounds your eardrums, and over time, it just eats away at the eardrum until such time as you don't hear anymore. In fact, our children are only 16 months old, and they hear at a 50 decibel level, which, if you want to give us an example of that, we usually speak at about a 12 to 15 decibel level, and an average rock concert is 100 decibels. So our children hear someplace between a rock concert and a conversation. But they should have ended up like the rest of the children that go into Jiangsu orphanage. If you look at this picture, this is how most of the children that are in the orphanage live. They live in cribs. This particular one, as you can see, 3 or 4 children to a crib, and they just line them up. And it's simply because there are so many children there that are abandoned or that are left fatherless and motherless. And so they end up in the orphanages. And most of the children do not, listen to me, do not get adopted. Most people don't know that. Most children in China that are adopted are the minority, certainly not the majority. They end up more like these children that are left there. But our children were very fortunate because they were left at an orphanage called Jiangsu. And in Jiangsu, there is a lady there who comes and ministers. Her name is Linda Shum. She is a Christian lady. She is a minister of the gospel of Christ. She went to China in 1998 just to kind of hang out and visit the place. She just wanted to see what it was all about. Bad decision. Because now this orphanage and this whole thing with the children just touched her heart in such a way that she cannot not go. And as often as she can get a visa, she is in China ministering and helping children. And she has set up an organization called the Chinese Orphans Assistance Team, which is reaching out to children. Well, in September of 2003, she came on one of her trips where she visited Jiangsu Orphanage so she could do some work there. And you're going to see a video a little bit later that kind of tells you more about what she does and what she did for us. But she saw these two little babies, and she knew that their chances of survival, even in the orphanage, being that they were so underweight and being that they were of such a major cleft, was slim. And she knew of a person up in Beijing by the name of Joyce Hill, who was also a fellow Australian. And she went to China, she saw the need, and she decided that she was going to do something about it. And today she runs a place called Hope Foster Home, where our children were fortunate enough to live from the time they were 14 days old. And they were brought up there by Linda Shum to visit them. And so instead of living 3 children to a crib, our children were fortunate enough to live in this room right here. That was their bedroom. The one on the left, that was Sydney's crib, and the one on the right, that was Reagan's crib. And they were able to live in that kind of a thing. They had individual assistants. Every single one of them had nannies, and those nannies were able to take care of them. And they call them IEs in China. And so they got the individual assistance that they needed. And you can see the cleanliness of the place is just remarkable. And when you compare that to the orphanage which we were in, it was just a major difference. But you see, they still had a problem, though. They had this hole that went right through the center of their face. And they couldn't suck as a result of that. They had a very difficult time feeding them. For the first 14 days of their lives, by the way, they were fed basically by an eyedropper, because it was the only way they could get food into their systems. But Joyce heard about a group called Love Without Boundaries. And Love Without Boundaries is a group down in San Diego that goes to foreign countries to fix cleft lips and cleft palates. Isn't that incredible? Doctors that are just remarkable. What's different about Love Without Boundaries is they don't ask doctors to come that don't know how to do the surgery. They ask only the greatest surgeons to come. For example, the girl that fixed my daughter's lip is the head of craniofacial surgery at Wake Forest University. Her name is Lisa David. The other person that fixed the other lip of Reagan is a doctor by the name of Dr. John Padilla, who was one of the foremost plastic surgeons and cleft lip surgeons in all of Southern California, who tragically just passed away in a plane crash in November. But it's just incredible the type of work that they were able to do. And so they performed this incredible surgery. You can see here, this is Dr. David actually performing surgery on Sydney. And when it was all done, they closed that big old gaping gap in their face, and we were left with 2 absolutely, I think, beautiful kids. On the other side of the world, about the same identical time in September of 2003, there were a couple of people that were worshiping here at Treasure Coast Community Church. And we heard about a mission trip that was going to go to China in January. Again, be careful what you do. That was going to go to China in January of 2003 to build a playground. And so Grace and I signed up for that. And in January of 2003, we went to build this playground. We didn't know anything about playgrounds. We didn't know anything about building anything. But we had good instructors. And so we went there and we started screwing stuff together. And there's a great picture here of me trying to be... Yeah, see that? I can't screw things together very well. But I'm trying there. As you can see, the back piece is supposed to fit. And it's not. The guy's legs are in the way, you know. But we were building this thing, and we actually did build it, and it actually looked like this. This is a picture of what it actually looked like when it was done, and it was really pretty spectacular. There were actually 3 of those towers that we built. That was great, but it was all about when we came out and we saw them when we were all done, these kids that were on the play sets. There's a great picture here of the kids on the play set, and just all those are orphans from the orphanage there that were out there, and of course it was pretty cold that day. It was about, I think it was about 20 degrees. It was just brutally cold in Beijing. But it was just an amazing experience. But we had time to go to this place called the Longfang Children's Village. And when we went in there, we saw these children. And they were of all different ages. Children that were big and little and all sorts of different things. And what was amazing is you held these kids, you just couldn't get over the fact that they weren't perfect. The reason they were there is because they weren't perfect. Everybody wanted them to be perfect. And unfortunately, people aren't perfect. And many people are born imperfect. And these kids were born very imperfect. One kid had a cleft lip. This next picture is a child that was born with a cleft. That's what a cleft lip looks like, in case you didn't know that. It just, it's just there, and when they're left untreated, that's basically what happens. They kind of bulge out, and they start to take on a thing. Another boy was there. He had learning disability. His parents just left him because he's not smart enough. But we came back after, and so we determined that we were going to go and we were going to try to adopt. Now, let me share with you just how difficult a decision that was for us. First of all, I'm 49 years old. I was 48 at the time. My wife was 47 at the time. When I was 19 years old, I married Grace. Grace was 18 years old. And very soon after we got married, I was in college, Grace got pregnant. We were so excited about the opportunity of being parents. And unfortunately, our child was stillborn. And we never had the excitement, joy, or whatever of even holding the child in our arms because it was dead at birth. But we just assumed that, that wouldn't be a big deal. We'd have more children. It would just, that was just a setback, no big deal. Well, months turned into years, and we never got pregnant again. And we tried and tried and tried, but just couldn't get pregnant again. And so we went to fertility doctors, and the doctors told us, you guys have got a real problem. And the problem is that you're not going to get pregnant. There's no hope for you guys because you've got a situation, a medical situation that is not going to allow you to even have in vitro or anything. So we knew we couldn't get pregnant. So we decided that we would try to adopt. And on 4 different occasions, we came within that close of adopting, and then something drastic or traumatic fell through. And the 4th time it happened, it was probably the most traumatic for Grace because we actually saw the child that we were going to adopt. We thought we were done. We thought it was a done deal. And literally at the 11th hour, we found out the child was given to somebody else. And I remember Grace just as clearly as if it were yesterday, saying to me in February of 1988, when that occurred, I don't ever want to discuss this again. For me, that was really difficult because it was really a dream of mine to be a dad. But I moved on, and we just kept on going, and things were exciting. And in all this time, God had always dealt with me that He wanted me to remain faithful. And the greatest example I can think of faithfulness is Abraham. Here was a guy that no matter what God told him to do, he just did it. But he also was childless and didn't have children, and yet God made him a promise that he would have a child. I remember reading that so many different times and thinking, wow, I guess I'm not going to be able to play in that particular arena. And so we moved on. And then we came to this point. And when we came to this point, we both came to this point really with some trepidation. In fact, on the whole plane ride back, even though both of us knew we needed to adopt, we never discussed it once. Not once. Not a word. I didn't discuss it because I remembered February of 1988. I didn't want that to happen again. But Grace didn't discuss it because she was really, really fearful. We're 48 years old. What are we doing? Are we going to be able to even be with these children? Are we going to live long enough to be able to share with them if in fact that were the case? But when we got back, we both went into each other's office one day and said, we need to look into this. We need to check it out. And so we sent in the application, and very quickly thereafter, I said to Grace, if we're going to do this, especially at our ages, we ought to try to get 2. And she said, what do you mean? And I said, well, if we don't get them right away, we should really try to get 2. We should find out what it takes to get 2. Because I also knew of another couple that went to Kazakhstan and actually got 2. And I thought, well, that would be pretty cool to get 2 at once, And she said, well, I don't know if I want to do that, but, you can look into it. And I went and I called the adoption agency, and I told them that, and she said, well, look, in China it's a little different than Kazakhstan. In China, you can't get 2 at once unless they're siblings or twins. And I said, oh, twins, that'd be cool. Yeah, I could do that. In fact, I think I'd really like that. And the girl said, well, I'm sorry, Don, but no one gets twins. It just doesn't ever happen. I said, okay, well, you know what? I think we should apply for twins. She said, well, it could really mess up your application if you apply for twins because they may just keep turning you down until there's twins available. And I said, yeah, well, you know what? I'm not going to worry about it. Whatever God wants is fine with me. If we get 1, we get 2, it really doesn't matter. I'm just excited that my wife is excited. So she said, okay, fine. I said, no, by the way, what's it cost for this whole thing? Because, I'm a money guy. I really kind of was, what's this all going to cost? And she said, well, it costs about $14,000 to adopt from China. I'm thinking, well, that's pretty good. I said, if I get 2 at once, do I get like a discount? And she said, no, I'm sorry. Basically all the fees are just doubled and everything. I said, okay, fine. She said, so it's, $14,000 a child. And I said, okay, fine. Well, 3 days after that conversation, I got a phone call from a company that I had sold some business to about 10 years previous. And I asked them, I said, hey, how you guys doing? They said, great. The reason we're calling is because we wanted to tell you we've got some money that we owe you. And I said, oh, really? What for? They said, well, you had that last payment that we had to give you on this business that you sold us. And oh, yeah, that's great. I almost forgot about that. I said, how much is it? And he looked at his thing and he said, we owe you $28,000. And I went, cool. And I shared with him that we were going to get twins right then and there. And he said, what are you talking about? I said, man, we're getting twins. I know we're getting twins because God doesn't give you $28,000 when you need $28,000 if you're not going to get something miraculous. And so we knew we were going to get something miraculous. Well, of course, every time along the way, we were filling out our paperwork, and I was telling everybody we're going to get twins. Everybody would look at me, yeah, no one gets twins. Even the INS lady. When we sent in the paperwork to the INS, which is the Immigration and Naturalization Service, she said to us, I noticed on your application here that you want 2. China doesn't give you 2. I said, yes, they do. And she said, what do you mean? I said, well, they do if you get siblings or twins. She said, oh, that's true. And she said, but no one gets siblings or twins. And I said, yeah, but let me tell you. And I told her the 28,000 story. And she said, I'm going to sign you up for 2. And so she approved us for 2, which, by the way, she told us she never approves anybody for 2. And on the 20th of August, we sent off our paperwork to China. And on the 27th of August, exactly 7 days later, a week later, the new list of available children for our particular orphanage came out. And the very first 2 children on the list were the twins. And instead of us waiting the normal 6 to 8 or 9 months that it normally takes to weed your way up the 200 people or so that are on the list, we went from 200 to first because no one else had been approved for twins. No one else had approval for 2 people except us. And boom, suddenly we got an authorization. Imagine, 7 days. Everybody told me it couldn't happen. But with God, all things are possible. Because I am convinced that if you remain faithful, He really does that. And of course, just a few months after that, we went off to China, we collected our girls, and here we are, standing here today. Really a dream come true. And it is just a remarkable thing. But what is the point of this whole entire story? What is it that God has continually shown me, if not anything else? And He's really shown me that God really honors people that are faithful.